What is going on, everybody in Luqman Nation? How are you? Welcome to Luqman Nation and People's Power Lunch in Luqman Nation with me, Jacquie Luqman, the People's Prophetess. And if you're watching on Black Power Media, welcome to the most dangerous platform on social media, Black Power Media, where I hope you have subscribed to click on the notification bell to receive notice for whenever anybody on this channel goes live, whenever we upload content so you don't miss it. You can also support Black Power Media on Patreon, patreon.com/Black Power Media. Lots of extra patrons only goodies through that platform, Patreon, and you can support Luqman Nation through Patreon, patreon.com/Luqman Nation, LuqManNation, where you get uh, um, regularly posted articles. Ooh, I'm tired. I just had my 45-minute walk. Regularly posted articles and a monthly patrons only stream just for you. Thanks so much, comrades, for joining me today. Happy Friday, y'all. Come on into the lunchroom. You all pull up a chair, find your friends, grab your lunch, go ahead and microwave your dishes. And if it's fish, be mindful of other people and don't leave a lingering smell in the microwave. What's going on to all of you in the cafeteria, Leah Boggs, Kamari, Dream Child, Wenzari. Oh, I butchered that, but Kamari, what's going on? Marion Francis, Savvy Sav, Ya Ofori Iwa. I was gonna get it one of these days. Manny Nile, Easy D, Alice is, Courtney 40 Blaze, Marley Gordon, Devin Dean, what's going on, everybody? S. Posey, peace, as I see you all are filing into the lunchroom. Manny Nile is having water for lunch. It's hot as hell where you are. It's a little toasty here in Washington, D.C. The humidity has not hit full force yet, but it's coming as it always does. And I want to start this lunch session, this People's Power Lunch, with Ricky Ryan. Thank you for joining. Glad to see you. Peace. I want to start this People's Power Lunch, with this news.
By our angels, led by the spirit of Mamie Till Mobley and Emmett Till.
For 67 years, the family of Emmett Till say they have been seeking justice, not just for the 1955 murder of the 14-year-old black boy whose tortured and disfigured body helped spark the civil rights movement, but for what led up to that murder, his kidnapping. The family believes one suspect is a woman who is still alive.
I mean, we thought of things like citizen's arrest. I'm just going to tell you. We thought of things like, well, can we find the warrant and present it to her? If the authorities aren't going to do this, what can we do?
Till's cousins, Deborah and Terry Watts, decided to go searching for the warrant, one authorities over the decades never found in their investigations.
There were cobwebs across all of the boxes, dead bugs, dust. We had to get chairs to even search on different levels for the documents. We did have gloves and masks as well, but we were definitely determined to find it no matter what. We pushed through.
2 men were acquitted of Till's murder by an all-white jury, though they later admitted to the killing in an interview with Look magazine. The case against Miss Roy Bryant, who now goes by Carolyn Bryant Dunham, was never tried. We reached out to Dunham and have not heard back.
We think this is evidence, this is new evidence that no one had ever searched for, and we were able to find it. It was unbelievable. It was overwhelming. We all cried. We were in also a state of shock, speechless in some instances.
Wow, the moment was very, very, very overwhelming. I had to look at the warrant several times just to make sure that it was real, that it actually read Mrs. Roy Bryant on it.
Though she was never arrested or tried, in 2007, after the Till case was reopened, Bryant's case was brought in front of a Mississippi grand jury. That grand jury did not indict her. A majority Black grand jury did convene in Greenwood, Mississippi, and they declined to indict Carolyn Bryant Dunham. What do you make of that?
We're not sure why they declined to indict her, because there was enough evidence there to indict her. The investigation had been done.
The Watts say their whole lives they have lived with Mamie Till Mobley's haunting cries for justice and the images that horrified a nation of their cousin Emmett Till's body lying disfigured in an open casket. It was a scene his mother insisted showing the world to expose what racist hate truly looks like.
Oh, sorry, let me unmute myself. First of all, thanks so much. Thank you, Namdi Martin. Thank you for the super sticky piece. Appreciate you so much. What does this all mean? It means, number one, that when Emmett Till was murdered and that case was originally investigated, the authorities at the time had enough evidence against Carol Bryant to issue an arrest warrant, not a search warrant, y'all. This is an arrest warrant. They had enough evidence at the time that this happened to issue a warrant for that woman's arrest in the kidnapping of Emmett Till, but it was never enacted. The arrest warrant was never carried out. That's the first thing, that even among the racist ass cops back then, they had enough evidence to at least write out an arrest warrant for this woman. Now, as far as the grand jury, the all-Black grand jury is concerned, let me give you a little bit of insight into why a bunch of Black folks would have chosen not to indict Carolyn Bryant, because she's an old white lady, and we have been conditioned to be too sympathetic to old white people. It doesn't matter how racist and how hateful and how violent and how evil they have been, and what racist, evil, violent, hateful things they have contributed to throughout their entire lives. And this is a lie this woman has continued to perpetrate by her silence. We always talk about, we have these little phrases: silence equals violence, and silence equals complicity, that we throw at white people. But when the rubber hits the road, at the end of the day, I agree, Courtney, that we don't know what evidence was presented to the grand jury. The prosecution does control that. But still, the fact that there was enough evidence, even without this original arrest warrant that was just found, there was enough evidence to convict that woman of perjury, to indict her of perjury in the very least at the grand jury. But those Black folks on that grand jury didn't. You know why? Because we have been conditioned to be forgiving and to feel sorry for old white people, that, oh, in their old age, they can't possibly be as hateful. We can't punish people for the sins of their past. Listen here, let me tell you something. I am not a believer in this justice system actually meting out any justice. The penal system in this country does exactly that. It punishes people. It doesn't rehabilitate people. It doesn't, do anything other than to be a place where this system throws people it does not want to deal with away and exploits their labor. So I say this with that caveat in mind. Find that heifer, serve that arrest warrant, and lock her ass up. I don't care how old she is. I don't care that she's 88. I don't care. When we see Jewish groups going after Nazi war criminals, former prison camp guards, former concentration camp guards, they don't care if those people are literally on life support in somebody's hospice. They go get them folks. Is going after Carolyn Bryant going to, of course it's not going to bring Emmett Till back, but the fact that the authorities had evidence enough to write an arrest warrant. Uh, and then let's look at the system itself, the Justice Department, the courts, and all of this kind of. These were two women who are the cousins, the relatives of Emmett Till. They found this arrest warrant by themselves, just two regular ladies, just two regular, random, not having any kind of expertise at anything but being Black and pissed off at this system not providing any protection for their preteen cousin in the kidnapping and lynching that he endured, that the ex-wife of one of the murderers has remained silent on through all these years. I ain't concerned about how this woman sleeps at night. I'm not concerned about her eternal soul. That is God's responsibility. I'm not concerned about how nice of a woman she is. I don't even care if she is sorry for the way she covered for her racist murdering husband, and if she's sorry for her role in the kidnapping and the racist murder of Emmett Till. The thing that is so galling to me in this case is the fact that these two random, without any kind of expertise, Black ladies found the piece of evidence that proves that everybody knew, that Carolyn Bryant knew all along. They knew. So the idea that the FBI, the Department of Justice, couldn't find this evidence that these two random regular ladies found that's bullshit. They knew that. It's not that they couldn't find it. It's not that they didn't know that the evidence was there. It's that they really never intended to hold anybody accountable for Emmett Till's kidnapping and murder, just like they never intend to hold anybody accountable for when the cops kill our people and indigenous people and Latinx people, just like they never hold anybody accountable for all of those racist white people who attacked the uprising in the streets in 2020 across this country. That it's the same system, y'all. It's the same system that drew out an arrest warrant for that woman and chose not to execute it. The same system has chosen in their investigation of the murder of Emmett Till, chose to ignore that evidence and chose not to hold her accountable. But since these two ladies have found the piece of paper that proves that there was always evidence of Carolyn Bryant's guilt, her complicity, her involvement in Emmett Till's kidnapping and ultimate murder, I say go get her, lock her up, and I don't care how that affects her 88-year-old self, because in staying silent all these years, she has clearly shown that she didn't care. She didn't care then, and she doesn't care now about the effect that her husband's and his friends' actions had on the life of Emmett Till and other Black folks. So we'll keep watching that to see what or if anybody does. It'll be interesting to see if the Department of Justice responds differently. I doubt that they will. But that was an interesting piece of news to start off this Friday, which is a long weekend. And I know that some of y'all are fitting to celebrate the 4th of July. And that's, I'm not going to chastise you for having a cookout and, for celebrating a long weekend, because cool. But I really do wonder when people have their cookouts over when us people, when us working class, poor and oppressed people have these cookouts, with the red, white, and blue themed and the fireworks. What y'all celebrating? I really want to know, because even if you look at what is going on right now in this country legislatively, I mean, every indication that at least is coming from the Supreme Court that this country was not founded on the principles that all men are created equal and that we all have equal protection under the law. The Supreme Court is proving over and over again that that's just a damn lie. And these are the folks who are saying that they interpret the Constitution as it was originally intended when it was written, right? So here are a couple of Supreme Court rulings that I think reflect this, that we need to really, really understand when we're talking about, celebrating freedom on the 4th of July. Because in another horrible, horrible Supreme Court decision, horrible, depending on whether you were expecting this Supreme Court to do anything different or not. The Supreme Court has just ruled to limit the Environmental Protection Agency's power to combat climate change. Now, there is a lot behind this ruling. I think most notably that this is a response to an Obama rule that was not enacted fully in 2010 that gave the EPA authority to regulate emissions from power plants across the country. And Obama didn't direct Congress to give the EPA this authority. At least this is the argument that the Supreme Court is making. And Biden has not chosen to reinstate this rule that wasn't really fully in effect. So why the Supreme Court really needed to make this ruling, okay, but they are sending a clear message indicating that, the EPA, a federal agency, does not have the authority to make changes to the nation's power sector without explicit approval from Congress. But because lawmakers in Congress haven't given that approval or that power to the agency, because, half of them, well, probably more than half of them, don't believe that climate change is real. And those who believe that climate change is real don't care if we die. We, meaning you, me, working class, poor, and oppressed people, they don't care if we die. They haven't given the EPA authority to make those decisions. And again, Biden didn't force Congress to do that when he implemented the rule in 2010, and Biden didn't push for it to be renewed and implemented. So you see where, yeah. So this is an interesting quote by, let me go down here. And find this quote that I found very interesting by, where is it? A quote from a member of the Heritage Foundation. And this person says, let me just read it because I pulled it out because for some reason I can't find it in here right now. Yeah. So According to the a what's her name? Um, Kathy Tubb, with the Heritage Foundation, said that many on the left want the EPA to regulate emissions to achieve a radical climate agenda. But it matters in this country who makes those decisions. From my perspective, it's important that the American representatives are the ones who make those decisions rather than unelected bureaucrats in the EPA. And that's wild to me for a couple of reasons. And I think it points to the hypocrisy and just kind of the it's so obviously hypocritical, that kind of reasoning, because these are folks who will say that, unelected people in the EPA have no right to tell power plants in the states what to do in regard to emissions. But a bunch of unelected conservative activists just decided that the EPA, a federal agency that is supposed to be setting policy for the protection of the environment in this country, can actually do that in the, you see, with the, so it's like what's, I can do it but you can't. Um our unelected bureaucrats can do whatever, but your unelected bureaucrats, no, we don't like them. And then the idea that the climate policy is a radical climate agenda, like protecting or trying to protect clean air, clean water, and providing a safer environment so that we all, can live on this planet, is like radical. Is just I just think it speaks to how much these people really do hate other human beings who are not like them. Because these people know that this ruling will impact mostly people in working class and poor neighborhoods who live in communities that are near these power plants. And most of those people are Black, Latinx, and Indigenous. They know that we're the ones who are going to be impacted the first and the worst by power plants now not having to adhere to additional emissions regulations and being required to transition to clean energy, renewable, or rather than clean energy, but renewable energy sources, which was the meat of this regulation. And even though this ruling doesn't eliminate the EPA's ability to regulate carbon emissions from power plants, what it does is it can't require that power plants move from coal specifically to renewable energy. So, of course, this was a big win for um, Joe Manchin, West Virginia, because the case was literally West Virginia versus the EPA. So this is a big win for Joe Manchin and the coal companies, and it is a big loss for health and environmental safety for working class, poor, and indigenous people who live near those power plants, who will continue, and in those coal mining communities, who will continue to use coal to fuel their power plants. And this is also a loss for employees, for coal miners who deserve to have a job that does not put them at risk for additional health issues related to coal mining. And they deserve to use their skills and their expertise in a way that provides energy that is more responsible and life sustaining and environment sustaining for them and their families as well, than dirty, filthy, stinking coal mines. But so that's one decision. So the EPA, the federal agency that is supposed to regulate um, uh, how companies and businesses and enterprises and industry treat the environment for our safety, we don't have a right to regulations that protect our safety now, because the Supreme Court has ruled that the EPA doesn't have a right to impose those regulations and make power plants transition to renewable energy. And then, of course, what's going to happen is that some states are going to have their own regulations along those lines, but you know that a lot of states are not, and those are states that are going to become even worse to live in for people like us. So that's one way that, you know, we're looking at the Supreme Court eviscerating the rights. We don't have a right to live in an environment that is protected by regulations that would ensure that corporations and power companies do not pollute that environment for our health and safety. But then there are two other rulings that came down from the Supreme Court that haven't received as much attention as like the decision to overturn Roe versus Wade and the EPA ruling is, and the EPA ruling has received. One of those rulings is this, and it's not really a ruling, it is a motion by the Supreme Court to kind of hold um, two cases that involve gerrymandering legislative districts aside for review until the court can hear those arguments and rule on those cases. The first case is Ardoin v. Robinson. And this is out of Louisiana, and this is reported in Vox News. Excuse me. So the court, basically in this case, Ardoin v. Robinson, handed down a brief order, and this was Tuesday, that reinstates racially gerrymandered congressional maps in the state of Louisiana, at least for the 2022 election, until the court can officially review this case and another case in its October term. Why is this important? Under these maps in Louisiana, let me magnify that a little bit for you. Under these maps, Black voters will control just one of Louisiana's 6 congressional seats, despite the fact that African Americans make up nearly a third of the state's population. So, according to the court and their motion, that means that Black people in Louisiana will have half as much congressional representation as they would have had under maps if Black voters were represented in a way that is equal to white voters in Louisiana, right? And this is really messed up because a federal trial court applied a Supreme Court precedent in holding that the Voting Rights Act does not permit that type of gerrymandering, and issued an injunction temporarily striking down those Louisiana maps and ordering the state legislature to draw new ones to include 2 majority Black districts. But the conservative panel of the Court of Appeals, the conservative panel of the Court of Appeals actually agreed with them and said, yeah, that's some racist bullshit gerrymandering that y'all are doing. And as conservative as we are, we obviously see that, and denied Louisiana's appeals to the trial court's decision. But here comes the Supreme Court saying, no, those maps are fine. And they actually, according to Vox, didn't provide any substantive explanation of why the Republican appointees voted to strip Black Louisianans of half their representation in the House of Representatives. But right there is the answer. They intend to, that's the reason. They want to strip Black voters of representation. Period. End of story. That's what they want to do. So they also talk about this other case, which is related, called Merrill v. Milligan, that also temporarily reinstated maps in Alabama that a panel of three federal judges said were illegally racially gerrymandered. Under those maps in Alabama, black voters were gerrymandered into basically having 14% of a representation compared to their population, while they make up about 27% of the state's population. So Alabama, like Louisiana's maps, are clear violations of the Voting Rights Act. They are clear um, examples of illegal racial gerrymandering, but the Supreme Court, particularly the conservative justices, but let's not act as if the liberal justices have done a whole hell of a lot to stop the evisceration of the Voting Rights Act. Yeah, they hate the Voting Rights Act. They don't want the Voting Rights Act to exist. So you should expect that when these two cases are heard in October, that they will be decided in favor of the states and the maintenance of these gerrymandered districts. And that will mean the dilution or the practical erosion or erasure of Black political representation in those states. And that means across the country. So, for people who are talking about, this is why we have to vote for a particular politician to save the Voting Rights Act from the Supreme Court. I think it's really wild that the Democrats, and this is exactly where I'm going, Prester John, thank you. The Voting Rights Act got eviscerated during Obama. And what have the Democrats done? What have they done to protect the right to vote that we supposedly have under the Constitution? So these people spend a whole lot of time telling us that we need to vote for, some establishment Democrat to first they tell us we need to protect the Supreme Court from the evil Republican, conservative justices. And then they tell us that we need to vote for certain Democrats in order to have those Democrats appoint so-called liberal justices. But when the Democrats had, control of the White House, had a supermajority in Congress for 2 years, veto-proof, filibuster-proof majority in Congress, these issues that we are seeing the Supreme Court eviscerate now were not addressed at all. Not at all. By the same Democrats who are now using these rulings and motions coming down from the Supreme Court to tell us to what? Give them more money and vote for more Democrats in the midterms. So it's this hamster wheel of vote shaming and gaslighting people to vote for Democrats, and then people vote for Democrats to protect this institution or the other, and then the Democrats, when they get in office, don't do anything to protect those institutions, and people keep voting for these Democrats. I mean, Joseph Biden is about to appoint a pro-life and anti-abortion judge to a lifetime appointment to a federal judgeship. Joseph Biden is about to do that. And this is the same dude talking about, I'm going to do everything I can to protect women's reproductive justice. And when the Democrats had the opportunity to do that, they chose not to. They literally said it was not a priority under Obama. The same thing with the Voting Rights Act. Now, I will give Eric Holder credit for um, fighting to uphold the Voting Rights Act when he was Attorney General, because the case Holder v. Shelby was the case that the Supreme Court ruled at that point, and stripped certain sections of the Voting Rights Act um, at the time under the Obama administration. But there were not as many conservative judges on the Supreme Court then as there are now. So what's all this stuff about, we need to vote for Democrats to protect the Supreme Court? And the Supreme Court is actually ruling in these cases in a way that lays bare what the Constitution really is and really always has been. Because remember, these are people who say that they are the conservative justices. These are people who say that they are originalists, which means that they interpret the Constitution and apply the Constitution according to the definition of what it meant when the law was implemented. So last week, when Clarence Thomas issues his opinion and says that at the time the Constitution was written, abortion was illegal, even though that was a blatant lie, he's expressing to you his originalist ideology, believing that the Constitution, as it was written, when it was written, means that certain people don't have rights. And that is how they are interpreting the Constitution. And that is why they are ruling the way they are in these cases. And another case that is very important along these lines is the case of, well, let me share, hold on. Is this case of Oklahoma versus Castro Huerta. This case is another one of those under the radar. Nobody's talking a lot about it, but we seriously need to, because the case, basically, the Supreme Court ruling undermined the authority of tribal governments. Now, this is absolutely horrific. Obviously, because it just destroys 200 years of precedent recognizing the right of tribal nations to self-govern, which is not all that much of a surprise, because there isn't a treaty that the U.S. has entered with indigenous people that it didn't break. This ruling undermines the sovereignty of tribes over their land and their governance. And it affects tribes' ability to prosecute crimes on their own land in a community-based way that meets the needs of their own citizens. All that is true, but what this really is this is about giving the state authority to exploit the land for whatever they want, whether it's uranium, oil, coal, whatever. And it also affects tribal authority in child welfare cases. So the state can actually come in and decide that it's not in the best interest of indigenous children to be placed with an indigenous family or an indigenous relative in custody cases. That's what this is about. This is about returning indigenous people to the state of being under the control of the entity that stole their land, violated their rights, and trampled on their human rights to put them in this situation in the first place, and continues to do so. All for the same reason that it was done then, land. So, um, it's interesting to note that in his rule, remember that back in 2020, the Supreme Court ruled that the state of Oklahoma had no authority to prosecute violent crimes committed by or against Native Americans that happened on their tribal lands because they fell under the jurisdiction of tribal governments. Um, so this ruling was the result of an appeal by Oklahoma to that case. And while this ruling does not entirely reverse that decision, the lines that it draws around tribal sovereignty really chokes the life out of it. And Brett Kavanaugh, writing for the majority opinion, said that tribal lands are a part of the state they are in, and they're not entirely separate sovereign powers. He said, quote, as a matter of state sovereignty, a state has jurisdiction over all of its territory, including Indian territory. Think about this in terms of the recent efforts by tribal governments to protect their people who were incredibly vulnerable to COVID-19. Think about their efforts to protect their people that they carried out. They set up roadblocks to keep people from coming onto tribal lands because they were trying to protect their people from COVID-19. And in the absence of any comprehensive health and social safety net focused response by this federal government to respond to the pandemic to protect us all, the indigenous people on tribal land said, we have to protect ourselves. So y'all can't come on our land. You ain't bringing your virus on our land, among our people, among our elders. Nope. So in the event of another situation like that, if the state decides that the tribal government has overstepped its right because to protect itself because it is no longer considered sovereign, the state can come in and say, you can't implement a roadblock to keep people out of your land to protect your people because the state has sovereign authority over you and your land. People are going to die because of all of the companies, the speculation, the mining and drilling operations, the toxic waste dumps that will be proliferated now on tribal lands because now, according to this Supreme Court decision, tribal governments are not fully autonomous and sovereign, and they cannot decide for themselves what is best for them and their people. The state can. So, y'all, remember that these Supreme Court justices who have issued these decisions along party line, 6-3 majorities, they claim that they are originalists. And they believe that the Constitution ought to be interpreted and applied in the meaning that it would have had at the time that it was written and became law. And that means that women, Black people, and Native Americans had no constitutional protections that the court or this country had to respect. They didn't exist. When the Constitution was written and became law, women, Black people, and Native Americans had no constitutional rights. And when we talk about the fact that two of these justices, one is a woman, one is Black, are among the group or representatives of the groups of people who did not have rights under the Constitution, keep this in mind. Amy Coney Barrett does not see her being a woman as the most important part of her existence. Clarence Thomas does not see him being Black as the most important part of his existence. They do not identify as those groups in regard to how law is applied. See, they don't believe in critical race or critical gender theory where the law is negatively impacting Black people and women people in certain ways throughout history. They don't believe that. Why? Because they represent the class interests of the so called founding fathers, the framers of the Constitution, the land owning rich white men who, at the time this document was written, had no intention of making women legally equal to men, and sure as hell didn't intend to give up those slaves that some of them owned, those enslaved people who that some of them owned. So they recognize the hypocrisy in their statements, in their positions, in their originalist ideology that they interpret the Constitution based on how it was originally, its original meaning. They are protecting their class interests and the class interests of the people who framed the Constitution. Never forget that the Constitution was not written for or by people like you or me. This whole ridiculous idea that this government is of the people, for the people, and by the people, that's a damn lie. Those were flowery words written by probably some of the best marketing uh, geniuses that I think have ever been written down on paper. They sold people the lie of democracy by putting some words down on paper that they knew they didn't mean, that they knew they didn't intend to actually be implemented, especially since they knew damn well they wrote those words creating a country based off of stolen land and the near genocide of one group of people and the forced enslavement of another group of people to develop that land. So, as annoying, that's not even the right word, as frightening as these Supreme Court rulings are to many people, you need to understand that the fascism that these rulings represent, has always been here. This country has always been a fascist nation. And these Supreme Court justices right now are just interpreting that fascist document called the Constitution for what it always has been, the fascist manifesto of white supremacist, settler, colonial, patriarchal men. So, I ask again, as I asked at the beginning of our People's Power Lunch, what the hell y'all celebrating this 4th of July? Whose freedom y'all celebrating this 4th of July? Because we don't have it. We don't have freedom under this Constitution. This is why I talk about so much joining an organization to build a people's movement, to realize the freedom in this country that we don't have. We look at other countries, Honduras, Ecuador, Colombia, Sudan, people in the streets in Sudan again, Nigeria. We look at people struggling against the neoliberal and fascist and right-wing governments in their countries, and we see how they have contributed to rewriting their constitutions, some of them, the people, and that is unfathomable. We cannot imagine. Like I talked to a family member this past weekend, and I told them how, in Venezuela, the people wrote their constitution, rewrote the constitution for the Bolivarian Revolution under Hugo Chavez. The people wrote that constitution. In Cuba, the constitution was just rewritten and updated with including the very important family code, not done by dictates from a few rich, powerful men, but with the input of the people of those countries. And this dude was like, how do you do that? How can you just do that? The Constitution is written. It was like, what do you mean? I mean, what is writing magic now? is like writing something that only a few people can do now? The very idea of scrapping that piece of paper that's not worth the paper it's written on and starting something new that is truly of the people, for the people, and by the people, it is unfathomable to those of us who need it the most. But you know who? That's not like a weird concept to? The very conservative folks who have pushed the justices to be where they are, the very conservatives that always talking about the Constitution is a holy document and it's sacred and it shouldn't be changed. Oh, those people very well understand the Constitutional Convention. They understand that and they are not afraid of it. And they have been talking about it and organizing on it for decades. So I really do hope y'all have a really great long weekend. If you have a cookout, cool, enjoy yourself. But y'all, if y'all celebrating some 4th of July, you got to ask yourself, whose freedom are you celebrating? Because we have never had freedom in this country. The Constitution has never guaranteed our freedom in this country. If we had the rights that this Constitution claimed to have guaranteed other people, we wouldn't have to be fighting for those rights right now. And the Supreme Court is literally proving everything I just said right. So let me see what y'all had to say. This is a good point. Baby, Haitians wrote their Constitution, and the reason their implementation is lacking is because the US and France continue to impose all kinds of imperialist interference in Haiti. Yes, the Haitian people wrote their Constitution, but France continued to make Haiti pay for winning their revolution against France. And the US continues to topple democratically elected governments in Haiti and propping up US-friendly neoliberal puppets who continue to impose austerity on the people and keep them poor. So defending a revolution is incredibly important in the process of revolution. And the reason Haiti has not been able to defend their revolution, quite honestly, is because we have not been in solidarity with Haiti as much as we should be. That's a part of the reason. That's really a part of the reason. We need to do a lot more supporting of Haiti. But really, ever since Haiti won their independence, their freedom, the US and France were right in there making them pay, and they continue to do that. So that's not an issue of the Haitians aren't doing something right. That's an issue of unending US and European imperialism. So it is true, Venezuela is far more democratic than the US. Did you know that in Venezuela, a politician can be recalled in a referendum at any point in their term if the people don't like them? And any politician, all of them. The people can call a referendum and recall politicians who are not doing their job. Do we have that here in this country? Where we are unhappy with the elected officials and we can hold a referendum vote against them in the middle of their term. We vote for someone who they say is supportive of Palestinian liberation, but as soon as they get elected, they start trotting out the anti-BDS line and Israel has a right to exist line. Can we hold a referendum vote against those politicians and kick them out of their job for lying to the people? Nope. Let's see what else you gotta say. Y'all have to say. Okay, let me dispel this thing about casinos and indigenous people. Um, Easy D says regarding the 4th of July U.S. Independence celebration, the Native American Indians, some of them will also be celebrating, especially the ones that own the casinos and hotels and the $5 Indians. Look, when this government has taken everything from you, has denied you equal access to every ability to support yourself and your community, has relegated you to small pieces of land in an enormous country that where this land was your people's, didn't compensate your people for what was stolen from them, and denies basic services and support to those people. And the only way you can ensure that your people have any kind of income that is redistributed to support your people is a casino. Yo, I'm taking a casino. First of all, that's number one. Number two, most indigenous tribes do not own casinos. This is not this is and maybe this is something I need to have somebody on to really talk about and dig into. But this is not like all indigenous people, all indigenous tribes have casinos on their land and they're all just getting rich off a casino. That is absolutely not true. So that's I want to I want to get rid of that idea that Native Americans are all getting rich off of casinos. Man, that is absolutely not true. Oh, let's see what you got to say, Prester. Haiti helped Mexico fight Spain in 1816, sent troops and arms on condition that Mexico free African slaves, free enslaved Africans. Absolutely true. And General Francisco Javier Mina requested help from Haiti. Absolutely. So look, y'all. Um, Look, enjoy your long weekend. Have a good extra day off. Relax, cook out, grill, whatever. But man, don't be out here in these streets celebrating some freedom on the 4th of July, because you and I didn't get our freedom on the 4th of July. That's why we're still fighting for it. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Thank you for joining me on today's People's Power Lunch. I hope that this lunch was delicious and nutritious, and I hope that you're full. And I had said that I was going to do an imprint on imperialism tonight. I'm not sure that I can line up a guest. So if you don't see it, I apologize, but I'm working on it. And, I hope it happens, but we'll see. So if I do, it'll be at 7 o'clock right here on Black Power Media. So stay tuned. I hope I can get a guest for it. But if not, then we'll see what we can do for next week. Until then, y'all, until Monday's People Power Lunch, you all enjoy yourselves. Be really good to each other. Be good to yourselves. And as always, a luta continua. The struggle continues. But Victoria Acerta, victory is certain. Peace, people.